Can you see my screen? Kindly react if you can see my screen. You can hear me clearly.
Yes, and I see your screen, Joseph.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Esther. I have Power Query editor opened already. It's just, let me go back to the normal Power BI which we have here. For a blank Power BI file, I just clicked on transform data. You can go through the same bar by clicking on get data, but I just went to transform data directly. And now I want to bring in the files which we will be using for the session. Now we've covered this before, but it's good to have a recap of what we are doing thus far. Remember our use case scenario. Uh, we have Joe Limited company who needs our help to solve a particular problem, and thus necessitated the need for us to create a data model. Now, the files before, we didn't do adequate transformation to them, but we are going to carry out those transformation steps today, and we are going to go into DAX fully and get that sorted. So right now, I'm going to select text CSV file because the files I'm bringing in are text CSV file. So right now, I can just select the files I'm interested in. I'm interested in bringing in, load it in, click on OK. I'm bringing the customer dimension table, the employee dimension table. This is a table that tells us about the employees. I'm bringing that in as well. Then new source, text CSV. I'm bringing in the product table. All these files are in the Discord channel, so you can access the files there as well. So I'll bring in the product table and click on OK. Then I can click on new source again, select text CSV, bring in my sales by store, store lookup, and my calendar table. Remember, all these tables, we have our dimensions, which we've covered at previous sessions, and we have our facts table, which will be our main facts of our reports. So I'm going to select this store lookup again, bring in store lookup. Store lookup is part of the dimension table. We made it easy for us to note the dimension table by giving it a lookup and lookup part of the name of the files. But it's not in all use case scenarios that you see a lookup in your files. Most times you won't see a lookup in your files. So how you know your dimensions? Your dimensions should have unique attributes. It should be a column that has distinct rows and unique values. So your dimension table should contain unique values and they should speak to one particular record. For instance, this customer table, the customer ID is providing the customer ID, which is located in your fact table as well, provides more information about the customer by telling us his home store, the customer name, the email of the customer, the dates the transaction took place, and other necessary details as well. So I'm going to bring new source text CSV again, and I'm going to bring in this calendar file. So this calendar file, I just dropped it on the Discord channel, right? So this is a calendar file for this data set. We can go ahead to create our own calendar, like I told you, which we may explore today. But this is the calendar file which will be useful and which we'll be using for majority of what we have to do in this session. Now, what all I'm doing thus far is a recap. So if it seems like I'm moving a little bit fast, I'm just doing a recap of what we've done so far for those who have not really been following or who have not really been active on the platform, so they can have an idea of what's going on. So right now, the issue which this data set had, so ideally I could have just loaded this data set in, but if you notice in all the date fields, the dates is appearing as text for some reason. If you look at the dates, it's appearing as text for some reason. Now, I'm not sure if all of us were in the session last time, right? But I want us to think through this. If you went in the session, if you were in the session, you could also, this is also a recap. What could be the cause of this data type showing as a text? So when we look at this, right, you can see 5, 15, 20, 18. If you are given this type of data, right, what do you think the root cause of this issue will be? You can quickly drop it in the chat, think through it, drop it in the chat. I'll just be taking response for. Oh, someone said I should zoom in. Okay. Okay, I've done that right now. I believe it should be better. Okay, so quickly look at these date fields, right? We also have the data set as well. Look at this date field. Now, if you look at it, this should be a date, right? But we have this date like this and it's formatting it as a text. So we cannot do certain level of analysis with this data. Now, what do we think could be the root cause of this issue when faced with this issue? Okay, nice suggestion, Idayat. Yes, nice response as well. So let's think through this quickly. Let's drop our response. I'll give us 3 minutes to think through this. Okay, so Ife was attentive in Sunday's session. Okay, yeah, using locale to change to UK format. Okay, okay. Okay, so that's correct. Now, the reason for those who were not around earlier, so the reason why I'm going over this is to carry everybody along. Now, you may be faced with situations like this as a data analyst where you are working with data coming from different locations, coming from different countries, different regions. So in this data set which we have here, the data sets large proportion of the data is coming from the US region. Now, if you know the US region likes to create formats in the form of MM. They like to create formats in the form of MM/DD/YYY. That's your month first, then your day, then your year. Now, for us in Nigeria and those who fall in under the UK, the Greenish Merit, the UK region as well. So the format which we were more accustomed to starts with your day, then your month and your year. Now, because Power BI is checking my location and is trying to make sense of this data set. So when it sees this, it doesn't see it as a valid date because how this is reading to Power BI by default is reading it as 5th of 15th of the 15th month in 2018. Now, we definitely do not have 15 months in a year. So it actually supposed to read it as the 15th day of the 5th month in 2018. Now, how can we solve this issue that we've identified earlier? So how can we do this? Somebody said using locale, right? So it's a quick recap of what have been done so far for those who were not available. So how you can quickly solve this, if you click on this ABC icon right here, click on this icon, you can come to something called using locale. So using locale allows you to change specific things based on your local region, country, or place. So if I change this from data type of text, I click on this, I come to dates. Can you see the format is now reading it in the appropriate format? So it's seeing it as, oh, this means 29th of this is just a sample of the output that it's going to provide. And when I click on OK, okay, so let me see, we have some errors, right? So let me go. What are the errors that we're having in this column? Now, ideally, what I would advise is first get rid of the first change type step. So Power BI drops that by default, right? So you should also be aware of that. So get rid of the first change type step. I can delete until end, right? Yes. Now, so I'll just go over this process again. So come here, click on this ABC, click on this to using local, change this to a date, click on OK. It's still seeing it as an error, which is quite strange. So let me see what could be the cause of this, right? Okay. Okay, so in this case, it's all because it was actually typed out as a text, right? So ideally this should work, but it's not well formatted. So another trick you can do for this type of use case now there's multiple ways you can handle a problem with Power BI, with Excel, and with other tools and technologies as well. You can do something called, I don't know if we were taught this before, you can come to your transform tab and or your add column tab, and you can create a custom column, a column from example. So if you don't know the M code to change something to a particular way, you can let Power BI, you can give Power BI an example, and Power BI will be able to change it to you, just like how you do your flash fill in Excel. Now I can do from selection, right? And I can just come here, insert step. Now this is going to, I'll just go over that in case I was a bit fast again and delete this. Now, ideally, that should have changed the data, the region of it, but I think this may not be, because of how this data set was typed or placed, may not really be the ideal case for it. But I'll show this, the using local working properly. I'll show a field where it's working properly, but I'll just show us another approach we can use for that scenario, right? So you can add a column from an example. I can click on this, and from this example, so you find this under your add column tab, I can type in the format in which I want this date to read in. And Power Query will act like the way you have flash fill in Excel, and it can populate that values in that particular format. So right now it's in it at 5/15/2018. I can have it at 15/5/2018. Let's see what it gave me. Oh, it didn't immediately read it in. So let me give it more examples. Okay, so as I provide it with more examples, it tries to read and tries to understand what I'm going for. Now, it hasn't yet perfected the use case now because it's still checking, oh, what's the type of logic I'm trying to achieve in this specific use case scenario. So it's trying to mix in a couple of functions. It's trying to mix in a couple of functions together to try to achieve it. I can come here again and say, no, you know what? This is the format I want it to be. And by providing it as much context as possible, it will learn. So it's just like your normal AI. So it tries to learn as much as possible with the value, with the example you've provided for it. So mm. Yes. Okay, so it's not still getting this example. Okay, okay, which is quite strange. It should pull this example for me. Now, what I could do now, for some reason, this column, this particular column is acting stubborn, right? Um, don't worry, we'll get back to it. I don't want us to have delay. I will get back to this surely. Now, I want to understand what's the reason why this isn't going through today. So it's going through the previous day. But so for this, let me use this using local method for this. I'll try to address this. Having the error. Is it because I chose Nigeria? Okay. Okay, so I have it like this, right? Which has sorted it out. Now it's evening, so I just really remember the reason why the initial one wasn't working right. So it's also good to note that when something is not working, you first take a brief pause. You think about it through, and you now think, oh, it could just be a slight error, a slight mistake you made that could have caused it to not work. Now, in this particular scenario, the use locale should work and is working, right? But who can guess what was the tiny mistake that I made? So it shows that even regardless of what you do, you can make tiny mistakes. Who can guess the tiny mistake I made, right? Just a tiny mistake. Yeah, think of it. I did this before during the last class, right? But I guess today today it wasn't immediately coming true, but who can guess what was the tiny mistake that was causing it not to work? Can drop it in the chat. Drop it in the chat. So when I clicked on this use locale, right? Come to use locale. And I selected dates, right? Now, the reason why it wasn't working, okay, I can even see somebody dropped it in the chat earlier. Right. Yes, exactly. I was choosing Nigeria, which shouldn't be the case. The data set is not coming from Nigeria. Exactly. The data set is coming from US. And I was one that recommended this earlier. So the idea of the using local is somebody sends you a file, right? The file is coming from a different region, a different location, a different time zone. You can just with this using local, you can specify what time zone or what area the file is coming from. Now, another thing you could do, I don't recommend this, is you could come to your file, you have a section for option, you have a section for data source setting. Now, under this data, not data source setting, sorry, under your file, you have options. Click on options. So you see the options you have in Power Query. Now you can come to a place here called regional settings. Can you see this? Can you see this regional settings? So by default, what you can do under this regional settings, you can change it here. Now, what global means is that any change you make in this file will affect your entire Power BI. Anytime you open a Power BI, it will affect it. Now, it doesn't really make sense if we change the application language or model language like this just to suit that particular use case scenario. It doesn't make sense because we can get another situation where we may need to change it again, right? So you can do that here. You have current file. So current file could also work. You can change the type for the current file, you can specify, you know what, I don't want to go through that stress of using local. Let me change it to English US. I can do that and I can show it, but because of because I will have to close my Power Query so that it really takes effect. I don't want to do that. Now you can do that from this regional settings. You can change it here. Now in Power Query itself, you can do it as well. Now, are we following? Are we following? I like showing different, more than one option ways to solve a particular problem, right? Now, the using example should have worked, but it's because of how the data was structured. So the AI itself wasn't really reading it as AI. So right now I can click on using local. Change it from this data type of a text, change it to date, and change it from English to English United States, because it's United States that has that desired format. Now, once we do this, I'm good. Do it for the second one. Now, what we need to do is we should ensure that the data type across is in the local data type of the host data. So where the data is coming from is US. So Geo Limited is a US company, so we should try to ensure that the data type follows that pattern as well. So I can click on this to be date. Now, once I've done that, we can see this effectively corrected that error that we were showing there, and we have this as a date field. I can come to, let me see this previous one. Okay. I could have actually even done all of them in the same transformation step. That's a cleaner way to do your transformation rather than doing multiple transformation. Now, what do I mean? I can come to this M code. Can you see this M code, right? Let me just copy this. I can copy this section of this M code. And I could probably come here and I could paste it somewhere there. Now, I'm not saying that's the best approach, but that's also another approach you can do this. Or I could have just selected the two columns. Click on this. Okay, that won't work. But you can always try to be more efficient in your transformation step. Now I've done this. I'll come to my employee lookup. Anywhere I have dates, ensure that it's actually using local. Okay, so I've changed this as well. Come to this product table. Ensure that it's using local as well. Anywhere there's dates. Okay, I can't see any dates. I can do that as well. Now, these dates that we have it here as a date. Now, we may want to check this data to verify this date is actually supposed to be in the right format that it is. Now, my suspicion is we should use local. We shouldn't use this actual date as we have here because it's a US data. So I can come to this, click on using local, and I can change the date based on that local to the US one. So I ensure that my data is actually picking in the necessary and right value. So English United States, right? Now with this, I can click on these filters to preview what my data result looks like. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, it's picking it basically, I think, correctly. So we can just check, okay, this data set, is it good? Looks good. Then we have store lookup. Also cross-check the date. Is the date fine? The date is fine. Calendar. Now we can change the date for this calendar because definitely, hey, let me see this calendar. Now, before we change the local of this calendar, if you see, the calendar is actually picking it in the right format. It's picking the necessary value in the right format. So that's something you should note. So the calendar is actually good. We don't need to change that as well. So just cross-check all your data are coming in the format that they're supposed to. Okay. Let me see this. Okay. So just confirm your data is coming in the right format that it's supposed to. Then you can come to home, then close and apply. So this close and loads it into your data model in Power BI. Okay. So like I suspected, we have some errors. So the errors are in the sales by store table. You can easily go to view errors when you have errors to see what particular column is causing the error. Now I can see this, I'm guessing is because of the data type. Yes. So this is showing 1/13/2017. I can come here as well, click on this. Yeah. So it shows that we shouldn't have actually changed that data type here because it was actually picking it in the right value. Now we've done some transformation to the file. So that's why it's probably picking it in the right value compared to the other ones. Now I'll just close that and okay, and I can now click on, I can delete this query that tells me about the errors. Let me just delete it. Delete the folder. So this is a folder created in your query. Delete the group. Now I can close and apply, and let's see if we still have those errors. We still have one that contained, have it containing errors. See. Still these values. Okay, so right now I want to try something. So just to see, because the data table, the data set is large, right? So I need to see what portion of these values normally gives errors. So I'm just showing us troubleshooting techniques. So I can duplicate this query, select this, click on remove other columns, right? And have a distinct I can have a distinct of these values by removing duplicates. Now we have this. Let me delete this. Okay, so we have it in this format. So it's actually coming in the US format. So yes, it's right for us to change it. So I'm just showing us techniques we can use to solve a particular problem. Now, I could have solved this problem before we started here, but it's a good learning and just delete. Do the same process of copying the query. Okay, can we see this? So it's actually now but when we close and load, we shouldn't have any errors now. We have a lot of transactions ranging from 2017, right? So I can just get rid of this, delete the group. Yes. So, but we have null values, which is something we can also look at later. But with this, we are sure that the data set is okay. So it's always good to cross-check your data before you load, close and apply. Now I can close and apply. And let's see. This it should load. Yeah, it loaded successfully without any errors. Now we can come to this data model and we can create connections. Now by default, it already tried to create connections based on what Power BI tries to understand from your data. Now you can just create connections if you don't know how to do it by just dragging. You can drag fields that speak to each other to the same fields, and that will serve as your connections. So I can connect this date ID.
Hey, Joseph. Joseph, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. I thought your screen is lagging. Sorry.
Okay, thanks for that. Let me stop sharing and we share. Okay, can you hear me clearly first of all?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay. Okay, so I'll share my screen shortly. Just want to be sure my network when I'm good. So I'm checking fast.com. Okay, so my network speed is decent now, so share my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Okay, it's coming up. I will let you know what is up. Okay, your screen is up now. Yes, you're on the modeling tab.
Yeah. So on this model, I can connect the transaction date to your date. Now you could connect actually like the date ID. That's if there was a date ID on this table, we connect it to the date ID as well. Then I can connect your customer ID to customer. Now, the relationship we've taught this relationship before. If you watch through the class, the previous class, you would know the relationship. You have this schema right here on my screen, which makes it look like a star shape. Call it a star schema typically in your data modeling, where you have a single fact file connected to multiple dimensions. Now, what these dimensions do is they filter your fact table. So when I want to see for example, if I want to see more information about these employees, right? I can click on an employee name and I can click on an employee name here. Remember, the employee name field is not provided in this sales by store table. Now, with the filtering that we have here, with this filtering option that we have here, I can click on this an employee's name here, and I can use it to filter this sales by store table, and it would work based on that context that we have here. The same thing, if I want to see manager, what did our manager do? I can connect it to this sales table. So your dimension table provides more context to your data, and they help you to filter your data based on specific relationship that you've created. Now, remember I stated we have four type of relationship. We have one to many, many to many, one to one, and many to one. Those have been covered extensively in previous sessions as well. And you've been shared documentations which can help you properly understand it. But what it means is, in essence, is you could have one product, yes, speaking to multiple multiple purchase item. So one product in this table could have probably been bought by multiple people in this sales by store table. So your sales by store table contains your daily record and is your fact, and is normally at the many side of your relationship, while your dimensions are what helps you to filter those your fact table and create relationship between your model. Now, I didn't want to dwell too much on this. I wanted us to go into DAX, because DAX is a really broad topic. If you do not cover DAX well, you won't really understand it. Now, data modeling is fundamentals to DAX, because the truth is your DAX, if you have a good data model, you may save yourself the need to write countless DAX to create your certain results. Now, right here, we have the model view, the table view, and the report view. If I click on the report view right now, for those of us familiar with pivot tables in Excel, I believe that was covered earlier on before we got to this stage. To create reports in Power BI is as simple as that. Just click on the button, and you have your report generated for you, right? Using just like how you have in pivot table. Now, this section of the screen is called your canvas. This allows you to drop your different type of visualization in, but just by clicking right now, I want to see, let's say, a particular customer, our customer, and I want to see our customers, and I want to see what is their quantity sold. What is the quantity that they sold? I can click on this. And by default, I get this level of result and analysis, right? I get this level of result and analysis. Now, by default, Power BI is able to create this for us using something called implicit measures. Implicit measures. Now, before I go on further, if you look at this, right, it's not actually stored as a number. So it shows you that if you do not complete your data cleaning step, right, if you come to your report, you won't really make so much sense of it. Right now, I clicked on this and it's actually reading this quantity sold as a value, as a column, not a number, because we didn't specify that data type in our data model. Now, it's good we ensure everything is all well and good, but I'm sure for those of us that watched the previous session, we would have probably created a data model earlier, I will change all of this because ideally all of this shouldn't be text. From here till, yeah, from the store ID, I could change all of this. I could probably leave the IDs, they are fine as they are, but I can change all of it from the order, the quantity sold, the quantity sold, I can change it to, I can change them to whole number. So I can do some level of analysis with it. Now, this unit price, I will ensure it is a decimal number, so I can do some calculations on it. The moment I have it as a decimal number, Power BI will be able to do some level of aggregation for me. So it's always good to confirm your data model before you go ahead to do your analysis. Now, close and apply this. Now, if you notice, once I did that, immediately we can see the value shifted to the right, right? Because your numbers ideally are formatted in the right direction. So by default, once I just click on a field, the customer name and the quantity sold, what happens in the back end is Power BI does a joining of these two tables. It does the joining of these two tables and does the filtering of the results based on those two tables. You don't see the joining that it does on the back end to create this calculation. And what we see, this output that we see, is called an implicit measure. So by default, Power BI can help you to quickly analyze your data based on implicit measure. So right now, this value is doing a summation of this. It's not even doing any summarization, doing do not summarize. If I want to see a sum of this value, I can click on sum. It sums this value, and I have this simple chart like this. If I want to see the average of it, I can click on average. We get an average of the values. If I want to see the minimum value we have there, I can do that as well. If I want to see the maximum, just your basic level of aggregation, you can do them with implicit measures. So these are called implicit measures. We have something called quick measures, but we'll go into that in more details later. So these are implicit measures. So we also have something called explicit measures. So there are two core types of measures in Power BI. We have the implicit and the explicit measures. What implicit measures refer to are measures created by Power BI for you when you do a quick level of analysis or aggregation. So those are measures created by Power BI for you. Now, what explicit measures are measures you created by yourself. So measures you created to be able to perform or express yourself freely. Now, by default, what Power BI is doing here is summing the quantities sold by the customer name. It has done that aggregation at this level. Now, if you want to replicate the same result without using implicit measures, explicit measures are good because you can apply more filter context to them, right? More filters and more analysis to them. So I want to do a sum of this quantity sold. How would I do it? Now, just like you will do in Excel or in Excel, Power Pivot in Excel to create new measures, creating new measures in Power BI is essentially simple and easy to create. If you click on this more option, you have the option to add a new measure. Add a new measure. The moment you add a new measure, the first thing is to specify the name of the measure. What is this measure called? I can call this quantity sold, or I can call it total quantity sold, for example, to give a distinction. Now I can say equals to sum. Now, so this is sum. So by default, we have a lot of our basic aggregation measures in Power BI. In Excel, we have them in Power BI. Now, there's a distinction between how Excel and Power BI does its own calculation. There's a key distinction between how they do their own calculation. So we need to note that as well. But what the key distinction is right now, hello? Hello? Okay.
Sorry, just you can go on. I think Absalom mistakenly unmuted as well. I've muted them.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so I'm saying I'm a little bit too fast. Yeah, sorry about that. So I was just trying to do a catch up of what we've done previously. Now, everything we've done prior to now was what we've done previously. Now we are doing something new, and I'm going to take it a little bit slow and easy for that. Thanks for the feedback. Now, I said by default, you have two types of measures, the implicit and the explicit measures. The implicit measures, you have your number fields, your fields that are values, you have your qualitative fields. So when you do reports or do most calculations, you do quantity versus quality, quantitative fields versus value fields. So you have the fields that describe your attributes and you have your numbers. So we have quantities sold in this case scenario, and we have the customer. You want to see a simple sum of it by just clicking on it, clicking on your value field and clicking on your descriptive field, you'll be able to get that level of information. Power BI will do that aggregation for you. Now, if you want to create your own calculation, you can easily do them with Power BI using explicit measures or that. How can you go about it? You can just click on this button, click on new measure. So this allows you to create a new measure in Power BI. Now, I'll go back to this measure because I'm not done with it. Now, what I just want to do is I want to sum up the quantity sold column. Now, click on this sum, click on sum. So the first thing when you're writing your DAX, you give your DAX the name of your DAX, then you type the formula which you want to use to solve your particular result. Now, I said by default, you have most of your Excel related formulas, but you also have a lot more type of calculations and formulas in DAX expressions. Now, there's a guide I've shared with us before so that we can know how we can write DAX and which DAX we can use for specific use case scenario. I'll go into that shortly. But right now, I just want to sum up the quantity sold. I can just do sum and I can specify the quantity sold value. And I can close my brackets and I can click on enter. The moment I've done that, I can click on this total quantity sold. And so when I click on it, we can see this value right here. This is a card. I can just click on the customer. Click on the customer. Now we have the exact same thing which we have here. Can you see this? Quantity sold, customer name. We have the exact same thing which we have here, but ours is different. So the beauty of creating explicit measures is you may want to do some further analysis. Oh, you want to do, you don't want to just get all the quantities sold. You want to get the quantity sold for probably a particular person. You want to get the quantity sold for a particular group. You want to get the quantity sold at a particular date, a particular time. We want to get the quantity sold for a particular region or period. Power BI can allow you to create those level of analysis using your explicit measures right now. So how can you get started? How can you know what measures you can utilize for specific scenarios? Right here, I'm going to show us a site that has been really helpful and is very helpful for you when you're learning your DAX journey. There's a site called DAX Guide. Now, Microsoft also has documentations which they provide information about DAX. But this site, I find it very useful because it groups your DAX formulas into different sections and region. Now you have measures that allows you to do aggregations, your sum, your count, your mean, your mark, all those level of aggregation, those are your aggregation functions. So if I right click, I can open this in a new tab. It will show me all the aggregation functions that we have. We have the approximated distinct count. We have the average A, that's average all, just like you have in Excel. It gives you an explanation of what the function does. Average X, so these are iterator functions. We'll go into that later. We have counts, count A, count AX, count rows, and we have all these type of aggregate measures grouped into this portion of our screen right here. Now, so if you want to know more about them, you can go there. Now, one thing I also like about this is if you go to the average, let's take average, for example, you don't know how to use average for some reason. Now, it will tell you what the function returns. So return the average arithmetic mean of all numbers in a column, and it will give you an example or a use case scenario for using that particular function. Now, I find that very, very helpful. I don't know about all, but I find it very, very helpful. Now, so this is just supporting document which we can use to practice our DAX as well. There are a lot of more DAX function. The thing I tell people with DAX and formulas in Excel, they are not things you should cram. It's more or less how you use it that allows you to get which one you should be able to use for your specific use case now. The same goes for SQL. You shouldn't spend your time cramming SQL queries. You should understand what the queries do. You should understand what your SQL queries do. But cramming is not the best approach to data analytics because there are some functions expressions you won't ideally use unless if you have faced the experience or you are placed in the situation to use them. So please take note of that. So right now we have the quantity sold. I just did a simple total quantity sold for all customers right here with a sum. The same thing if I want to do an average of the quantity sold, I can do the same thing, just give it a value. I call this average QT sold, and I'll give it average. And when you click on this comma, you see this bracket, you see IntelliSense is already populating for you. So if you just type the name of the column that you want to go to, or you navigate below, I can just type quantity sold. And I can click on it and I can close my bracket and I can add this to my measures. Now these are just simple measures. We'll go into measures in more in depth. Now, the thing I want us to note is Power BI also allows you to create something called calculated columns. Now, the output of this, your measure, is not stored in this table. That's something you should note. This your measure, it only applies for when you have a filter on your report. What do I mean by a filter on your report? For example, if I click on this average quantity sold right here, it shows me the total number of quantities sold. But if I click on a product, for example, it filters the report to the particular line item I've chosen, which is this product that I've chosen. The value doesn't always stay, the reporting doesn't always stay constant based on that. Now, there are use case for measures, and we have something called calculated columns. If you need to slice your measures, if you need to slice your calculation, or if you need the result to be stored in a particular table, you can use something called calculated columns. Now, I hope I'm not going too fast. I hope I'm clear. I hope you can hear me. Hope you are following. Hello.
Joseph,
Okay.
do you want us to unmute some people to hear from them?
Yeah, that'll be fast. That'll be fine. So I just want to be sure we are following.
Okay, kindly raise your hand. Be sure that you actually had good network, because from my end, his screen has not been lagging and his voice has been very clear from my end. So if you have any feedback, kindly raise your hand.
Okay. Okay.
So Chuku, you have the
Okay.
mic.
Go ahead, Tochiku. So
Okay, I can hear him clearly and I can see the screen.
okay.
So everything is fine from my end.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Tochiku. So thank you. I don't want to overload us with too much of information, right? And I want to ensure that we're actually grasping what I'm saying. Now, just a recap, we have two types of measures, your implicit and your explicit measures. So implicit measures are measures or calculations. Now, let me not use the word measure. Calculations that Power BI helps you to do by itself. Power BI has a calculation engine in it that allows you to do some level of analysis by itself. Now, if you want to create your own type of calculations, you don't want to just use the default ones Power BI has created for you. You may have specific use case scenarios. You may have more advanced conditions. You can use an explicit measures by creating your simple functions, your expressions as well for yourself. Now, that's the difference between the two of them. You have the implicit and the explicit measures. Now, I'm talking about calculated columns. Now, what are calculated columns? So calculated columns, if you write your DAX expression, for example, if you write your formula and you want the result to be stored in a particular column, you don't want, like I said, your measures are not stored in your data model. But if you want your result to be stored in your data model, you can write an expression to create you a calculated column for that. Now, let me show a use case scenario for that. We have this. Let's go to this employee lookup table, right? We have first name, we have last name of this employee. We want to get the full name of this employee. Now, I want us to keep our Excel thinking cap on. How will we get this? Supposing we had an Excel file, right? We are given this data because we've done Excel. We have first name, we have last name. How will we get these values together? Okay, so I can see concatenate or flash fill. Okay. Well, okay. So concat is actually the better version for concatenate. Concatenate is quite old. I think they're getting rid of it. But you also have other functions. So if you are using Office 365, you can either use a text join. So there's not text join as well. There's other more interesting functions you can use. Now you can use something called the @ symbol as well to quickly join your two texts before. So this solution that I'm going to show, you can do it in Excel, you can do it in Power BI if you are not aware of it, but I believe you should be aware of it. But I'll just take it in case you're not aware. So right now, I want to add the full name to this list. So I can also filter by the full name. So this is a use case now for your calculated columns. You want to filter your result. You want to be able to keep that your result that you have there in a slicer. So you can use a calculated column to easily help you achieve that. Now I'm going to click on this new column. Now, I want to call this column full name. So the first thing is, what is the name of your calculated column? I'll call it full name. Full name, you can give it the space you want. I can call this equals to, or let me even use the pattern that is following. It has a underscore beneath, so I follow the same pattern. So full name equals to, I'll just type first. So it shows me this employee lookup first name. Then I can use the @ symbol. So this symbol does your concatenate for you. It does the same thing in Excel as well. And I can use the @ symbol again. Then with that, I can have the last name. And once I do this, I can commit the value. By clicking on this, we have this first name and this last name populated as your full name in your list. Now, this is just like how you write a typical, how you can do it like a typical joining of those values in Excel as well. So with this, we've had this as a calculated column. Now I can filter this report, or I can come to this report sheet and I can click on, now that I have that value there, I can click on, oh, I want to see the full name and the amount they sold and the quantity they sold. And it provides me more detailed analysis than if I was just to click on first name and the amount they sold. Now you could have people that probably have the same first name. That aggregation wouldn't really make sense, right? But you could have people that have the same first name. Now I could bring in this first name as a slicer in Power BI. You are going to go through visualization in Power BI more in depth tomorrow, but you can click on the name and you can change your visualization under this build view, and I can click on slicer. Now, if I want to filter it based on, okay, I selected the wrong field. Click on this, change this to a slicer. So if I want to filter this based on the full name, it filters the report and showing I don't have values for that person. This person doesn't have value. It filters the report to this particular person right here on my screen. So that's just a use case now of calculated columns. You could have those values stored there. Now, calculated columns, what calculated column does is it calculates the value for each row in your table. So it goes through the rows and it does this aggregation for us together, which we have this full name, which we have right now. Now we could also add a column. Now, if you go to this sales by store table, I don't know how many of us open the Excel, right? I don't know how many of us open the Excel for this, but if you go look at this table, if we had to ask, what was our revenue for the year 2020? I want us to think, do we have, with the data of this sales by store, we have the Excel file, we can open it as well. Do we have the fields that would allow us to create that? Revenue for 2020, or sales for 2020 rather. Sales for 2017. I think the data only include 2017. So sales for 2017. Do we have the fields that will allow us to do that? Now the data contains customer IDs, it contains some. Yeah, so somebody said data and sales by store. Somebody said quantity sold times unit price. Quantity sold times unit price. Yes, excellent. So you can, excellent. That's a nice suggestion. So what the person is saying is, we have your quantities, you have the amount that the person has sold, you have the price of the goods, right? Why don't we just do a multiplication, your quantity sold times unit price, and we get the specific value as the sales for that particular month. Now I'll show us how we can do that. So we can come here again under this table tools at the top end of your ribbon. You can create a new column and we'll call it sales. We call it sales. And I'm going to say this sales is equals to quantity. Once I click on this quantity times unit price. The moment I do this and I click on commit, it populates the value for the sales at a row by row basis on my report. Now I have this sales part of my data in my report. So I have this part of my data set for my report. Now I can come to this my view, this my report view. I can click on this employee, for example, and I want to see the sales for this person. And I'll be able to see the sales value. Now, this allows me to be able to see the sales value. Click on data labels. It shows the sales value for it. The sales value is different from the quantity value. And this is showing a sum of the sales value. Now it's important to note I've showed us two use case scenario of calculated columns. So if you want your values to be stored in your data model and you want to calculate easily at a row by row basis, your calculated column is a good use case scenario of it, especially if you want to filter your results at the end of the day. You want to filter that column results. You can use your calculated column for those use case scenarios. Now, if you don't want to filter your result, if you want to create measures that can allow you to do more advanced and more suitable use case scenario. Now, for example, we have this sales, right? This sales is just telling us about our sales. Now, you may want to ask the question, what's our yearly sales? What's our quarterly sales? How much are we making? How much is a particular product making? How can you go about doing this analysis with Power BI? Now, it's very, very, very simple with Power BI. The key thing is for you to know what you want to achieve, and Power BI will be able to help you to achieve that easily. Now, by default, you see we've created two measures thus far. All these are measures we've created. We can save them in a particular location so that we have it in a nice and neat location. Now, what I can do is I can come to this enter data. I call this measures table. I can leave this column 1 and I can click on load. So this table is loaded into our model, right? But what we can do now is I can click on the measures I have. I'm just clicking on this total quantity sold. Remember, I was the one that created this. At this measure tools tab, right? You have a home table. So this home table specifies where your measure is stored, where your measure is going into. I can click on it and I can select this measure table. So that moves the location of that measure to that measure table. The same for this quantity sold. I can click on it and specify the measure table, and that moves it to that measure table which we have inside these values here. So we have our measures table here. We just created simple measures. Now we want to do further analysis of our data. We have certain questions that we want to answer. I don't know how many of us can remember the questions, but we can take a look at the data. Think of what are the key questions you would like to answer? And how do you think Power BI will be able to allow you to answer? You can just quickly drop those questions in the chat, and we will now see how we can express ourselves with Power BI to get us those answers that we need. So DAX is data analysis expression. The key thing for you to do is express yourself in DAX. Okay, so I can see year today is exhausted. Hope you are following. I think maybe it's the time a bit, but don't worry. I'm trying to catch up and ensure we grab as much as possible, and we'll finish on time. I don't want to take too much of our time today. So yeah, so look through the data set quickly. Now think, what are the core questions that you'll be interested in answering? The truth is, when you're given any type of data to report on, the key step is to, either you're giving those questions or not, you need to first ask, what are the critical reports needed for this? Where can I find the data for the reports? What type of analysis can I create based on this report? Now, what type of calculations will be required for me to create those reports? Now, the simple reports, right now we've created sales right now. I can just add a new measure to have that sales as a measure. I call it total sales. And I'll do equals to sum of the sales column that we just created. To have this sales. If I want to see, okay, what was the total transactions that happened in that store, right? I just need to have a count of the total transactions that happened in that store. I can click on new measures, and I can click on, I call this total transaction. I can use the count rows. So this help me to count the rows, the number of rows in a particular table, and I can specify my sales by store table. Now this will help me count, what was the total number of transactions that took place in the sales by store table. That's a simple way to utilize DAX to help you get your desired results. And I can click on commit, and this produces the results we have. So total quantity, total sales, total transaction, we can have this result. Now, okay, we have this transaction result right here in my screen. What if we wanted to specify the result of a particular product? Now, let's even open this Excel file. Let's open this Excel file. Right? Okay. So what if I wanted to specify, what is the total amount of, what was the total sales for the product smartphones, for example? Total sales for the product smartphones. Now we are going to think of how can we create that level of report for us. We want to see, we just want to see the total sales for the product smartphones, right? How can we create that report for us? Now, if it's Excel, we have this data set, for example, we have this product category. Let's say we had our sales here. If it was in Excel, how would you go about creating that calculation. And we had this smartphone probably repeats more than once, right? How would you go about creating that calculation to see the total sales for smartphone? Okay, so quickly, so how can we see the total? What would we do? So this Excel. So I just the key thing is if you can do it in Excel, just know you can do it. You can most likely do it in that. You need to just think of your problem and think of how you can solve the particular problem. Okay, so let me even create it as a different table. So we have product ID here, products. Let's say products, smartphones, uh, uh books, Bible. Now I can just click on this. Click on this, right, so that it will repeat plenty times. And I can just have this as sales. First one between, let's say, 10, 100, and populate these values, right? So we have these values like this. You are giving this use case now. I know we've done this in Excel. I know we should have done this in Excel, right? So we have these values like this. We need to see what the total sales for smartphones, right? Excellent. Somebody is finally saying it. Yeah. So we could use some ifs, like you said, we could use some ifs in just like how we use in Excel. We could use some ifs, but we can't use some ifs in DAX. There's no some ifs as of now in DAX. So, but what is the logic behind some ifs? If you remember, if we read some ifs calculation, some ifs require what? A sum range, that's a range of value to sum up, a criteria or a filter that you can apply to the range for it to filter, and it requires a filter category. Now, another approach of doing this without some ifs, for those who are more who knows array functions, you can also use filter to carry out this result. Some ifs also work effectively, but you can filter the result based on that. I use filter as well, and filter asks for an array, what to include and what is not empty. So the key thing is you need to understand, oh, we have this situation. I need to be able to somehow sum up my values. I need to be able to sum up those sales and filter it to a particular product. And that way I can be able to get my results from it. And that's in essence what we are going to try to achieve in DAX. Now, one function that is highly powerful and probably one of the functions you will use for most of your analysis in DAX is something called the calculate function. The calculate function. So the calculate function is a powerful function in DAX. Let me even open the DAX guide so we can see a little bit about it. So calculate function, let's just even have a background overview of it. So it's a function that evaluates an expression in a context modified by filters. Now this English, let's even try to get it broken down very small as well. So we have this, so we have the calculate function. So what is the calculate function? Now I click on new measures. Remember, what we want to do is try to get the total sales for smartphone, for example. smartphones. I'm just going to smartphone sales. I'm just going to do equals to, I can do calculate. If you see this calculate requires two things. So under your DAX, you have two things. You have under your DAX, you always have a compulsory argument and an optional argument, just like your Excel. Your optional argument are normally like in this square bracket, but the optional argument in this calculate is very, very useful for this particular use case scenario. Your optional argument allows you to filter your results. So you can filter it as much as possible that you want to do. So for example, this expression is telling us to calculate what? We want to calculate the sales, total sales, comma, then we want to filter a particular column. So you can specify the column. I'll call this products. Was it product or product category? I think it was product, right? So products, and I'll say equals to smartphone. Now, it's good, remember to keep this in quotation. So Power BI will be able to read it. Let's see. So let me click on this. Let me see. This products. Oh, it's product category, not product. So the reason why I edit as blank, so I can just come to this formula and edit this from product to product category. And I can click on this. So can you see this? So right now, this already gave me the value. This just gives me the value of this particular smartphone product. Now let's even verify by getting the right output from our result. I can click on this product category and let me click on this total sales. Let's see the values that we have. Turn on data label. And I scroll down. So can we see this showing it as 0.73? Let me even change this to 0.3. Let me change it to a table so we can see the values properly. So smartphone's value is 270 naira, and that's what we have here. So by using the calculate function, we were able to filter the entire report based on this smartphone's function. Now, it's important to note that this calculate is a very, very powerful function, and one thing you can really use calculate for, which is very, very useful, is something called time intelligence calculation. Now, time intelligence calculations are calculations that occur based on a particular time, and they help you to provide rich and intelligent analysis based on your result. Now, some of those time intelligence calculations is you could have a situation you want to know what's our revenue year to date, what's our month-on-month percentage revenue change, what's our year-on-year percentage revenue change. When do we provide the most sales in? So time intelligence calculations allow you to produce nice and neat types of report and analysis. It gives more context to your data. So for example, I want to create a simple, this is our revenue. I want to get how much revenues have we made. So I'll just click on revenue and click on this line chart. Let me click on the line chart to show. Let's see. What's this? Let me just click on this transaction date. Okay, so everything is for a particular year, 2017. It doesn't really have much value, right? And the month is January. That's so good. That's so good. So it's the reason why I say it's not so good is because when you don't have a lot of years or month context, you won't be able to do as much rich analysis which you can do with your time intelligence values. Now we could do other analysis as well. We could still do the calculation, but the calculation wouldn't really make much sense if we just have values for a particular month. So let me come to this, my calendar table. Let's see. Month. Okay, so is this my transaction table? My transactions only speak to a particular month, which is not too good for analysis. Now you could so the key thing is, let me just go back to my key message. We could write formula. I think we may need to modify the data file to increase more analysis and more reporting that you can do on it. You can click on new measure. And for example, I want to do the sales, our sales year to date. I'll call this total. Let me call it sales, or our sales last year, for example, last year. I can do equal to. I have functions that I have DAX expressions that can allow me to do this. Now, the first thing, to write your DAX nice and neat, you can press your Shift and Enter button. It creates a line. You can press your Tab button to expand the line. And I can call this, calculate. And I'll call this sales, because I've created my sales expression already, total sales, right? And I'll do comma. Now, under these filters, I can apply whatever filters I want. Now, there are time intelligence functions that allows us to filter a date, filter a result based on the specific dates. We have like previous, for example, previous month, previous year, previous day, previous quarter. You can utilize this. You have year to date, date to date, total to date. You have all these values as well. You have date add. Now, date add is very, very powerful. If you want to add a particular date to your result, you can use this date add. If you want to subtract dates, you can subtract dates from your result. Now, all I'll just do is calculate, and I'll specify a date. Let me specify the transaction dates, right? Comma, and I'll do numbers of intervals. I can have a -1, and the intervals I'll call this yeah. So I want to see what was the sales like for last year. Now, this result wouldn't give us much. It won't give us an accurate result. The reason being because our data does not contain more than that year. But like I said, we'll look at the data, try to edit that out for us. Now, time intelligence calculations are normally calculated in this sort of manner. You have your value, your calculate expression that allows you to do further filtering based on your normal expression. Like now we have this total sales. If we want to see the total transaction year to year, we can change this total sales to transaction and we'll be able to carry out that level of analysis as well. Now, this is the use of date add. We could also use those previous year to date. This tax guide can provide you with more than as much tax explanation, tax function that you would require. Now, one bonus tip I'm going to show us is we have something called quick measures in Power BI. For instance, if you don't know, you're starting your journey, you don't know what to do, you don't know how to do a specific calculation, you can use these quick measures right here, which we have here, or you can use suggestions with Copilot. So you have Copilot already embedded in your Power BI. I can click on these calculations. Let's say, for example, I want to see average per category. I don't know the DAX measure to do it. I can click on this average per category. All I just need to do is specify the base value. What's the base value? I click on, let's say, my sales, my total sales. What's the category? I'll specify the category, let's say my customer name, and I can click on add. The moment I've done that, you can see it has created the expression for me, thinking, going through my data, and it's suggesting I could use this, probably use this expression for me. Now, it's important to note what the expression is doing. One other thing you can do is utilize Copilot as well. Now, you have suggestions with Copilot. You have to sign in to actually use these capabilities. You have to be signed into your Power BI, but with the Copilot, you can explain it, what your particular use case scenario is, and you should be able to give you possible DAX expression to solve your challenge. Now, this should actually sign in, but it's not going to now. But I'm also mindful of time. But you can do it from your end. Just sign in and turn on Copilot. Now, before you do it, under your options, you must have ensured that you enabled Copilot suggestions. If you come to File, come to Options and Settings, come to Options, go to Preview Features. You should ensure that you enabled the option for Copilot on your quick measure suggestion. So ensure you enable this option on your Power BI to be able to utilize it. Now, it's not signing in now, but it should actually sign in as well later. But that's just a good use case scenario of that. Now, before we round up, I've talked on measures, I've talked on calculated columns. There's one other thing you can create in DAX, which is called a calculated table. You can create a calculated table. For instance, we can create our own date table in DAX using simple DAX formula language. Now, I can call this a new, under this table tools, I can call this new table. And I'll call this date table 2. Now, how can I go about doing this? Right? So the key thing about creating this your date table, so you have to have like a start date and an end date, which can help us to create this. Sorry, which can help us to create a date table for us. Now we will do this, and I'll just introduce us to DAX query view, and we'll call it a close for today. Okay, so the first thing is we have your date table. We can use the calendar function. Now, under Power BI, we have calendar auto. Now, there's a distinction between the two. The calendar auto, we automatically look through our data and it will create for us it will look through our data, and based on our data, it will look at the first and the last year of any of the tables in our data, and it will automatically create a date field for us. That's what this calendar auto will do. I can click on this and let's see the result. Can you see this result? It will give us the value from the start date, the least start dates we have in our data, and the most end dates we have in our data. If we see this, we can see all of this. So it can provide us with that. Now, there are specific use cases in there for this calendar auto, but if you want to specify your own start and end date, you can use the calendar function, calendar. Now I can use the calendar. Now start dates. You can actually type it as a date, at any date you want, or you could use a date already in your table. For example, we have this sales by transaction table. We want to probably get the date of the transaction. We want to create a date table based on this. I can do calendar and I can do minimum. So the first thing is your start date. You can use minimum of, I'll just specify start date. So transaction date. Transaction date. Then the end date will be maximum of the transaction date. Now with this, let me click on enter. Can you see this? Now with this, it will provide for me the calendar table based on the minimum dates and the maximum dates in the model. Now this just provides me a single column called this dates. What if I wanted to add in more than one column? I want to add in other columns. Let's say your month, your year, your quarter to your table. So how can I go about doing that? Now, if it was in Power Query, I know we would have easily been able to click on those, right click to add those columns, but you could actually create new columns and you could specify what you want from those specific columns. For example, I could either come here to my table tools, I can create a new column. I call it year, for example. I can say equals to year. So it has the default tables that we have in default functions we have in Excel as well. I'll call this year of the. Now I just need to specify the dates in this new date table that I created. Call it dates, right? Dates. Year of this date, and it will populate the value as the year, which will be 2017 throughout in this particular use case now. I didn't understand that. Okay, in this particular use case now. Now, if I wanted to do every single thing in a single DAX expression, that is possible as well. Let me just delete this. So let me look for the table. Where's the table? Okay, this is it. So I can just get rid of this first. Now, I want to do every single thing in a new table. I want to add all those values in a new table. I can come to new table. I call this dates, and I'll call this equals to, I'll call it date table, rather, date table. And now it's important to note in Power BI, there's something called variables. We have variables. So variables are containers that helps you to store your codes in your particular formulas, in your single formulas or expression. Now, variables is nothing technical per se. You want to, let me try to simplify variables, for example. Right here, before we did a formula that could get us the calendar, the date period, that's it, from the start date to the end date, which was our calendar, right? Our calendar was able to provide us from the start date to the end date, which the start date was the minimum value of our transaction dates. This transaction date was the minimum value of our transaction date and the maximum value of our transaction date as the end date. Now we close bracket. Now this was what gave us our necessary result. Now we need to also be able to add columns to this particular table to get us more, to be able to add more analysis and more results in the same expression. We don't want to be opening more than one expression to do this. We don't want to be manually adding those tables later in as well. Now, it's very simple. What we can do is we can just come here. We call this is calendar. Now we call this first field, which we have here, we declare it a variable. How you can declare a variable is called using the var. var is for the variable, and I'll call this date. Date equals to, and let me find it. So this is the first variable. Now for variable, you first declare your variable, so it stores all your values in this particular variable called dt. Then you now have a return argument. Can shift below return variable. So this your return specify, oh, what should be returned when your variable has been declared. Now let me go over this again. I can specify the columns I want to add. Hello, are we still following?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm saying
Okay. Okay, so I was going over this again. So I said variables. The first thing to do is first to declare your variables. Now, what are your sorry, having what's your variable? So your variable is a container, like I said, it's just a container that stores your code, right? Okay, so it's a container that stores your code. Now, so you by storing your code in a particular variable, you can be able to reference that variable elsewhere. So by storing your variable in a code, you can be able to reference that variable elsewhere and have your desired result. Right, so I'm going to calculate the minimum of the transaction dates. So while we'll soon be rounding up, I just want to be sure we covered some certain things today. Then the maximum of this. Okay, I didn't close my bracket. Close my bracket. So it's not calculate, it's calendar. It's calendar. So your calendar, you have the start date and the end date. Now we have a return. What do we want to return when this variable has been declared? Now we want to add the values into we want to add columns to this particular table. Now, what I'll just do is specify the name of the table, called it DT. So DT, if you remember up here before, we've specified that this first result should be named as DT. That's the var DT variable that we created. Now we want to add in columns to our date table. We want to add in the year, for example. We want to add in the month or stuff like that. So how would we go about doing this? We can just add columns. So add columns is a measure in Power BI that allows you to do stuff like that. So I can have this as add columns. The first thing is to specify the table. Now you can specify the name of the column you want to add. So the first column I'm going to add is, I'll call it year, right? I'll call it year. I give it a comma. Then the next thing is the expression. I want to see the year of the particular date. The year of this particular date, which we have here. And I can click on comma. Now I can specify the name of the second column I want to add. Let's say, for instance, I want to add the month name. The month name, for example, I want to add the month name. I could have the month name, comma. The expression I want to have it is, I want to format the dates to show me the months values in Now we've done this I'm sure we must have done this or something similar to this in Excel. Close my bracket. Now, if I want to add more and more columns, I could use this. I could add as many columns as I want to this my add columns formula. But if I'm done with it, I can just check this. The moment I'm done, I can click on commit, and this adds my results in as a table in my data model. So this is a new table created using DAX simply. So remember, let me just break this thing down. The variable, this is just like a name that you use to store the output of the first formula. Then you now reference that output in another formula in the same result. Now, there are a lot of use case scenario for DAX. DAX is not something you just learn on a quick note. You have to do self-study, self-practice. I've shared materials on DAX, and as much as possible is the more you practice, the more you'll be able to use DAX. I'll share specific use case now for DAX. Now I'll be ending the session with showing us a new feature in Power BI so we can quickly cement our learning and we can round up with this session. So right here, we have something called DAX query view. So DAX query view. Now, for those of us who have used SQL, those who haven't used SQL before, for those that have used SQL before, I'm sure you may have seen something similar to this. Or if you've used Power BI, you may have seen something, you may have seen a view that looks similar to this. What this means is for your DAX queries or your DAX formulas, you can be able to run your DAX and be able to check the result of it and copy that result of the values and probably paste it in a spreadsheet. Easy in this DAX query field. So let me show us an example. We have this total sales quantity. If I right here inside this DAX query view, I can click on this button, have quick queries. I can do something called define and evaluate. Define and evaluate. Now, this does a define, it defines the name of the measure that I've created and it evaluates the result of it. If for some reason I need to copy this result, maybe put it in a spreadsheet and share it to somebody, I can copy that result and share it to somebody. Now you have another feature, can come to this quick queries. You can do define all measures in the model. This define all measures in the model. You can do this as well. You can just evaluate the measure. If you don't want to define it, you can just evaluate to see the output, the necessary output of the measure. You can do that. If you come to a particular column, for example, you want to see the query distribution, the column statistics, you can click on these quick queries and show column statistics. So this tells you the number of distincts, just like how you have in your M query, you can have these values in your model. Now you can also do this for all the tables. Show top 100 rows or show column statistics, and this will show the column statistics of this entire table and data that we have. Now, I know I've covered a lot of, I've tried to cover a lot of things today, but the truth is a lot will still have to be done by ourselves. We have to do a lot of study, a lot of read up, a lot of questions and answers. We'll try to sort the data to ensure it captures in a lot of more rich information. And I think you may get an updated version of that coming soon. We may get that in the Discord channel. So right now, I've been talking for a while and I want to hear from us. What do we have questions? Yes, please.
Besides, please, if you have questions, kindly raise your hand so you can get access to the mic. So please go ahead.
Okay. Now I have two questions. The first one, I noticed that some of the things we can do using the calculated columns, we can also do them in Power Query. So from a performance point of view or from a technical point of view, which one is better? Should we do those things in Power Query or should we take them to um, um, Power BI and use calculated columns for them? That is the first question. Then the second question has to do with the implicit and explicit measures. Like the example you gave, we can get the total quantity through the implicit measure, and we can also get it through the explicit measure using DAGs. So since we can get it through the implicit measure, for example, what is the difference? What is the motivation that we want to write?
Excellent. Okay, okay, complete your question, sorry.
I just have a little observation on the data set. You have actually said part of it concerning the date. Then if you check the employee lookup table, you notice that most of the employees started work as from 2019. In fact, most of them were employed 2022, 2023. Meanwhile, the um, transaction table captured sales only in 2017. So that means all the employees were employed after
the transaction, which doesn't make sense. Yeah, so it's important to do. It's a fictitious data, right? But that will be cleaned up. It will be cleaned up and be shared. So I observed that as well during the session, and I observed there are some things like you rightfully stated that doesn't make sense. And the key thing to notice is also a good use case scenario, right? When you are giving data that doesn't really translate to much, you can't really properly analyze your data. So it's a good use case scenario as well for you to be, as analysts, you're also detectives to detect issues with data set and problems around it. Now, the questions you asked in regard to using implicit or using explicit measure. Now, in this case scenario, like something we did for this smartphone sales, where we needed to filter the result just to a specific product or specific product criteria. Those are type of use case scenario for explicit measures. When you want to do more advanced analysis, like your time intelligence analysis, for example, your sales year to date, month to date, your year to date, month to date, same period last year, all those type of calculation, month to month variance, and all those type of calculations. When you need to write further analysis based on your measure, that's when you would ideally create an explicit measure. Now, just let's take, for example, the default implicit measures that we have there. Let's say, for example, I click on this sales, and let me just click on this product group. The default implicit measures that we have is just you have your sum, your average, your minimum, your maximum, your count distinct, count, standard deviation, variance. Now, you can use this to answer some certain questions. Questions related to, what was our sales year to date? What was smartphone sales year to date? They don't want you can probably bring this and start applying various filters. Now, the thing about applying a lot of filters in your report is user experience. You need to consider, will the user always be clicking on this filter every single time? Can't you have an expression that gives you the necessary results you need at that particular granularity or level of analysis? I hope that has answered or addressed your question. Am I missing any other question that you asked?
Yes, the first one, that some of the things we can achieve with calculated columns, we can also do them in
Power Query.
Power Query. So from a performance and technical point of view, which one is better?
Okay, so in regards to that, right? As much as possible, ideally, it will advise that as much as possible, you take your transformation step. You do your transformation step before you load it for your reporting angle, probably in your transformation tool, which Power Query could serve, right? So it's ideally, like, it's best. It doesn't really make sense. You've already loaded the data into from Power Query. It's like moving. Let me explain it in normal sense, right? Like graduating from a particular class, then going back to the class beneath it also to address a particular problem. Yes, so like you said, there are some of the things you can do in Power Query. That's for the calculated column, but there are some. This joining was just a small use case scenario, but there are some that you wouldn't be able to do or utilize using just Power Query. There are some use cases now you may actually need to use calculated columns on your data set. But if it's some simple transformation like combining this customer name and combining the employee name, ideally you can do it in Power Query so that it saves you the time of writing some DAX. Number one, it saves you the time of the DAX. And also, there's also something called performance in your reports. So there's a section, it's just a more advanced topic of DAX, which deals with performance analyzer. So you need to check how your DAX queries are performing based on a particular metric and time. Now, I won't be going into that because now because as much as possible, I don't want to overload us with, I think I've already overloaded us with some information which will be needed, which may be needed later on in our career as well. But that's just my update on what you said. I hope that clarifies things.
Definitely, thank you.
Okay, so somebody said the DAX query view is not so clear. I should go over it. I'll just go over this quick.
Let's not take more questions again.
Hello? Don't worry. I know. I just want to address I just want to address one thing. So don't worry, no quiz, no quiz today. We'll probably do the quiz some other time. It's because this is kind of like an impromptu, not really an impromptu class, but because of the timing of the class, we know some people may not really be able to join in, so we won't do the quiz. I don't know if we may end up doing the evaluation today. I think we should. I don't know if we have the link. We could have that dropped as well. Or maybe I'll discuss with the team about that. But just to talk about the DAX query view. So the DAX query view. So ideally, when you write your measures, all these your calculations, right? You cannot really save the result of the calculation. Let's say, for example, we've done this total sales or this average sales. We need to save the result. We need to save this result. And let's say we want to send it to somebody else. We want to send it to somebody else. We want to probably give the person that information without creating an actual report or dashboard. There are some scenarios where somebody will ask you, and this normally happens in SQL, for example, where somebody will just ask you, okay, I want you to quickly run a query to tell me who is our top selling performer and give me the file in an Excel spreadsheet, for example. With this DAX query view, you can write your DAX in your Power BI that gets you the result. You can now get the output of the result and send that to the person using by copying the result like this. I can copy this result and paste it on a spreadsheet, and the person will be able to see the result of my DAX calculation and DAX performance as well. So if you are used to, probably when you take the SQL class, things may become more clear on the use case scenario of this. It's relatively new. It's very, very nice. It's very, very nice. And it's just a knowledge I think you may find useful maybe when you've practiced a lot on the Power BI. Somebody said they prefer Nike. No. I don't think so. I'm really, really exhausted. I wasn't really able to teach the way I would have loved to teach today. But I ensured, one thing is I tried to ensure as much as possible that this class will hold, because I know there've been a lot of push, but I hope this class will hold. And I believe we've learned a thing or two. I don't want to assume. Kindly drop yes in the chat if you learned a thing or two from today's session. So